Cool. Right. We are going to get started then, ladies and gents, because it's just gone 7 o'clock, and we will begin. So welcome, formally welcome to this chat. Another one in this really great series of chats that we've been having, and I'm hoping that you guys are really enjoying coming and visiting these. It's been really fun doing all the research and putting together this suite of talks and trying to make them varied across a number of different topics and themes, and we really do hope that you enjoy it and that you engage with it and you're taking something away. So tonight's chat is with a legend of the medical field, but Lilia will enjoy this one. As always, what have I got to start us off with? I've got an amazing video, so I'm going to do that right now.
This is Joe, and this is what he imagines will happen to him at a physiotherapy appointment. But how do Joe's expectations align with reality? Joe's heard tales that physios can be a bit, well, intimidating. Physios are grumpy creatures, gruff and not very friendly. Poor Joe. But in reality, Joe's relieved to find his physiotherapist is actually very pleasant indeed. But Joe has one last niggling concern. He expects it'll cost him a fortune. Instead, Joe learns that most patients get results in just 5 sessions, and it will cost him less than he thought.
Well, there we go, ladies and gentlemen. That was, I hope you enjoyed that. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Mr. Tony Gill. You can turn your camera on now, Tony. He's the lead. There he is. Look at that. Isn't he beautiful? He's the lead, the owner of Bristol Physio, who are a Clifton-based physio practice. And they've got satellite clinics. David Lloyd in Long Ashton. They've got another one at Backwell Medical Centre, and they've got one in Long Ashton Village. So it's a really well established practice. And as you just saw in that video, Tony's, oh my God, he's crazy experienced as a physio, and all the treatment routes that go with that role. I mean, I could have taken a piece of paper and just gone with all the things that he can do. He's an NHS specialist in musculoskeletal medicine, and he's a 5th Dan black belt in jiu-jitsu. Tony, welcome to our chat, my friend.
Hiya, hello. I was entertained by your introduction. I'm thinking, where's it going? Where's it going? The Nuffield video was really interesting. I'm like, that was entertaining. I don't think I've seen that. So thank you very much, Ollie.
I thought that the cherry on the cake, as far as that was concerned, was this is Joe. That made me laugh. For those of you who are watching and you can't see the screen of the people who are in this meeting, there is a Joe in this meeting, so that made me laugh quite a lot. So I've entitled this interview "Injury Prevention in Sport and Physical Preparation." It's going to be pretty different to the other types of chat that we've had. Obviously, we've been sort of interviewing sports people about their lives and opinions and all that kind of stuff. This is going to be a bit more in-depth and a bit more informative as far as a specialist or a tailored approach to body preparation and all of that kind of stuff that we can specifically use as gymnasts. And I really do hope that everyone's going to find it beneficial. As always, if anyone's got any questions, stick them in the chat window. I've got my chat window open. And Tony, I think that you'll be able to see it as well. That was lovely, Lily. Thanks for that. Yeah, stick them in the chat, and we'll pick on various questions as we go throughout, if that's all right. So, firstly, Tony, talk to us about being a physio. I mean, I've been to a physio before. In fact, I've been to see you before, and I'm sure that other people have been to see physios, but other people may not have done. So what does that word actually mean? What is your kind of day-to-day role as far as being a practicing physiotherapist is concerned?
So physios do a wide amount of things. So physios do lots and lots of different roles. So there are physios right now in intensive care, helping people to breathe because you need muscles for your lungs to work. So there'll be physios right now in intensive care, helping people with COVID whose lungs aren't working well. There'll be physios helping people get over a stroke. There'll be physios helping people with learning disabilities. There'll be physios helping people, young babies who aren't meeting developmental kind of normal landmarks, helping them learn to reach those kind of normal stages, learning to turn and crawl. I work in a very specific area, which is when you hurt yourself, usually. So you've either damaged something, you've broken something, you've torn something, or something just hurts, and trying to get your body going back to normal. All of you, your bodies are absolutely amazing, and they're complicated, but they are utterly amazing as well. And we try and tap into how they heal and how they do well when you need that. But we also work in prevention, trying to keep you strong and fit and able to reduce your risk of injury, to stop you getting problems. So that's kind of my area, reducing injury. And if you are injured, how can I get you back to normal? And how can I stop you having that injury again?
So basically, if you were a Mr. Man character, then you would be Mr. Fix-It to Mr. Bump. That's what you're telling me.
I would be Mr. Fix-It, absolutely, yeah.
So how did you get interested in becoming a physio in the first place? I mean, it's quite a specific avenue of medicine, and for you to be sort of wandering down. How did you get involved in that in the first place? And along the way, what qualifications did you have to get to facilitate your role within being a physio?
So I am a bit of a Mr. Fix-It. I do fix things. I've always made things. I'm kind of good with my hands. I can do things. I've always been able to do that from an early age. As a kid, I was making stuff out of wood. So I've always had that kind of make it, fix it kind of attitude. And I went into physio a little later, actually, than most people. So I went back as a mature student. And I had to prove I could still study, because if you go into university, which you have to do physio, you normally have to have things like maths, English, some of the sciences. So it's very science and maths you need to have on a level with A levels, really. And you need to probably have at least Bs at A level in science and maths to get onto a physio course.
Do they still do to the younger members of our audience? Do they still do A's and B's and things like that, or is it all numbers now? What's the equivalent of a B in numbers?
No, it is at A level. It's still ABC at A level, but it's changed to GCSE.
Yeah, A level, A, B, C, D still.
Okay. I'm showing my age by not having been in mainstream education for a long time.
So you need a minimum of usually 3 Bs at A level to get into physio. That's a minimum. Most course places, for every one place, there are 50 applicants as a bare minimum. And so usually you're
sorry, say that again. 50 applicants for one place.
Every one place. Physiotherapy is one of the highest level of people trying to become a physio. And so the degree's always been really oversubscribed. Partly that was because the NHS used to pay and give you a grant and pay your fees. So years ago, tuition fees paid and getting a grant. I mean, no wonder why people applied. Now that doesn't exist. That's gone as well. But it's still got a really high amount of people who want to be a physio.
Wow. Okay. So it sounds like it's been a pretty interesting journey for you. Okay, cool. Let's talk about let's get down into the nitty gritty of what we've come to talk about tonight. We're obviously a sports club, and we do loads and loads of different physical exercises, and we load the body in lots of different ways, at different pressures, at different weights, with different time frames that are attached to the loading that are applied to those bits of the body. Let's talk to me about physical loading. I mean, you hear a lot of rhetoric particularly about the rebound sports, such as trampolining and gymnastics and tumbling, particularly placing athletes at risk of both chronic and acute injury, just because of the rebound aspect of those sports. I mean, what do you think? Do you think that physical loading of this type is a good thing? Particularly bearing in mind that the majority of the people that we get coming to sessions, they're young, developing bodies. Is it good for them to expose those developing bodies to those loads, or should they limit their exposure?
So I know your club. My boys are 6. I've got twin boys. They've been going to your club since they were very young, and there's a baseline that children on the whole from the age of or under 6 probably should not be trampolining, because they aren't able to on their own. They haven't got the reaction to reduce the stress forces and the double bounce injuries, especially force fractures. That is children under 6. But we're looking at a whole lot of injuries with that. When you go to Axis, and my boys have been on your trampolines from a very early age, they haven't got the physical capacity at a young age to bounce high on their own. They're not allowed on with other children. They're allowed on with a parent controlling them, with them in their arms. So I've never had a problem with Axis with young children because of the way it's well managed. It's managed safely. At home, I've had parents come to me with I saw a parent not so long ago whose son wasn't walking very well, and when I asked why he'd stopped walking, he'd been on the trampoline. He's 2.5 with his 2 sisters. He'd fractured his knee from a double bounce injury. That's because he's too young and should not be on a trampoline with sisters. Axis don't do that. You're a professional club. You don't let people do double bounce, and you certainly wouldn't allow a child under 6 to do that. So I don't think you can look at injuries with trampolining and say it's a blanket thought process. If you're in a club that takes injuries seriously, who takes thoughts about how you look after people very seriously, you can make a very safe, sensible environment. My view is, looking at rebound, you get a really, really intense cardiovascular workout on a trampoline. You get maybe 60 to 70% increase heart rate activity on a trampoline versus jogging. You get proprioception control, which means learning balance and stability around your foot and ankle right the way up your body, that you wouldn't get from a lot of other exercise. I love trampolining. As people get older, mini trampettes for the older age who are starting to suffer with maybe some bone density loss are a great way of them actually improving their stability, their balance reactions. Their bone structure needs calcium, so it helps with density, but a trampoline doesn't give them impact. So actually, I think trampolines a wonderful way for multiple ages from 6 and above. If you're under 6, you could argue it's probably not the best environment for them to be doing, and especially without any supervision. But I've seen you all on trampolines. Who does it on their own, or have you got a spotter on the side? When you're learning rotations, you've got a mat that gets pushed out in front of you, so you land on the crash mat. I think you're an exceptionally safe and sensible club. And my view from everything I've seen is that's how it should be managed.
So your message is that the loading actually in the rebound setting actually is a good thing.
Loading is good. Loading in a rebound is good. It teaches your bones to be stronger. Loading done well and sensibly and learning in a correct manner gives you stability and balance. Loading itself is not a bad thing. Your bodies are growing and developing, and if it's done sensibly at a good rate and you learn slowly and progress over time, I think trampolining can be an excellent way, if managed safely, for you to learn to load well. Yes.
Brilliant. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you. Obviously, there are still injuries that are involved in sport across, you know, the myriad of sports. But thinking specifically about the types of sports that you would see in your practice, what sort of things do you see from places like trampoline clubs? And dare I use the word, places like trampoline parks and home garden trampolines? That's what sort of injuries do you see? And then, sorry, go on.
No. So I'll give you some stats just because I'm giving it anecdotally isn't the same. But for trampolining across the board, arm and hand injuries are about 30%, head and face injuries about 20%, trunk and shoulder injuries about 10%. And leg and foot and injuries are the other big group there. So the worry I have, and a lot of orthopedic surgeons I know say they'd never have a trampoline. I have a trampoline in a back garden. I have a safety trampoline though. And the injuries they're worried about, and usually the home variety where the springs and the edge of the mat are not well covered and legs slip in between and they end up with fractures. That's basically buying a cheap trampoline, I'm afraid, and they're not fit for purpose. So I have a non-sprung trampoline, which doesn't have, it's a floating bed. There are no springs. The spring is an underneath mechanism. All the edging and netting, if you hit the net, the edging, they're not steel poles, they're rebound. So if you hit into it, you can't hurt yourself. So the injury rate for my children is as low as I can make it on a trampoline possible. When you go to places like yours, you don't see the springs, they're covered. You also have, if you're landing badly, you have someone to push you back over again. You can't compare that injury to a trampoline park where you don't necessarily have that level of care and attention. Their trampolines might be a good quality, but the care and attention with kids crashing into each other, the head injuries and the neck injuries, usually as someone's over exuberant in a trampoline park, that's when people get injured. It's the head injuries and neck injuries that we worry about more, the spinal injuries. And again, they're far, far higher in trampoline parks and at home. They don't happen to anywhere near the same level if they're done in a professional kind of a gym where you're a trampoline club and a gymnastics club. So yes, there are injuries, you can't stop it, but it's not the same thing. You are going to get injuries, but you're mitigating and reducing your risk.
I think you're absolutely right. I think it's important to try and, for the injuries that you do see, both in your practice and in NHS emergency rooms where they are recording that kind of data, is that there is a difference between those three settings. You know, a trampoline park, a trampoline and gymnastics club, which is completely different, and then there's the back garden trampoline environment.
I took rugby right now and said how many injuries go to A&E with rugby. If I then included touch rugby with rugby and asked how many head injuries are in rugby, but included touch with that, that would be completely unfair to touch rugby because they don't get head injuries anywhere near the same level, whereas they probably both get knee injuries and ankle injuries to a similar level. So you can't call apples and pears the same thing.
Brilliant. Okay, so regardless of the, and I think it's really important that you've identified that we make all of these different provisions for care and safe practice, and one at a time, and appropriate matting in place, and a coach-led environment to ensure that the route through the sport is linear rather than just sort of zicking around and choosing what amazing skill to do next that you're not necessarily ready for. Regardless of all of that kind of stuff, we can't mitigate the risk completely, and we do still get injuries.
Yep.
But from an athlete's point of view, what can they do in their sort of normal day-to-day lives, or more specifically in their training environment, to help reduce the risk of injury in all of the areas that with the statistics that you quoted just now? And as much as you might want to see them in your practice because it pays the bills and all that kind of stuff, how can they avoid visiting you or an emergency room in the first place?
So I can see most of your faces apart from Ali and Jasper. You're all teenagers. That's what you look like age-wise. So if you want to reduce your risk of injury, do more than one sport. Don't do just one thing. If you're a competitive swimmer and all you do is swim, your level of injury is higher. If you're just a hockey player and all you do is hockey, your level of injury is higher. And so we know that at your age, if you do multiple sports, your risk of injury already goes down. So learn to run and cut and change direction. And that can be because you are playing tag or catch as a younger kid in a playground. That can be because you're kicking a ball around. That can be that kind of environment. Learning to run and change direction is a really important way of reducing injury for other things. Because actually, if you want to, you've all heard about that word core stability, yes or no? Does that mean anything of any of your word core? If you want to switch your core on the most, sprint and then change direction. To stop you falling as you change direction, your muscles have to spike really quickly that core stability on as you shift direction. That plus doing, I think gymnastics is an amazing base core. So I've already spoken to my wife about this. As my boys grow, they're going to run, they're going to do gymnastics, and they're going to climb. They're going to have different skill levels. Partly, and they're going to bike because I like climbing and biking, and they're going to run because it's good for them, and they're going to do gymnastics because it's really good for them, and they're doing it now. Well, when we're not in lockdown, but your skill that you have in gymnastics is a really good. It teaches you balance, control. It teaches you physical strength of your own body without pushing weight. So you're learning to control yourself in time and space. I think that's an amazing skill and is incredibly transferable to lots of other sport later on. So gymnastics for me is one of the pure things to learn, just like running is a pure thing to learn, and then find something else as an interim. So mix your sports, guys.
You're definitely recommending that parents play taxi on more nights of the week than just the ones that they send them to our club.
I'm afraid so. There's some other things in there. If I was to right now really, really reduce your risk of injury, I would make you all get a minimum of 8 hours sleep a night. So there's really good high level evidence on multiple papers now that show that if you're a teenager and you sleep less than 8 hours a night on a regular basis, your risk of injury substantially increases. So some say you're 60% more likely to have an injury. Some are 20%. It depends on the paper. But basically, if you're not sleeping, you're not recovering. And if you're not recovering, then not only are you fatiguing more quickly and therefore your reaction skill level goes down, but your muscles and your body don't seem to maybe recover as well as they should. So those of you who are burning the midnight candle on screens at night, looking at Facebook and whatever else at 2 or 3 in the morning, you're actually making yourself more likely to have injuries, definitely. I
think that's a really pertinent thing to bring up, because speaking to some of the girls in my squad that I coach, and there's definitely 1 or 2 of them, they walk in through the door and I'm like, my goodness, you look shattered, and they're like, yeah, I was up until 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock in the morning. And I'm like, 4 o'clock in the morning, what were you doing until 4 o'clock? And they're like, just texting my friends, or playing Minecraft or Fortnite or whatever it is that they're doing. And you're just like, dude, you need to cut that out. But actually there is a physiological benefit to switching off and actually putting your head on the pillow.
Yeah, we all need sleep. We have something called the circadian rhythm. Circadian rhythm means sleep at night, be awake in the day. It's about light. So when it's light, you're awake. When it's dark, you're asleep. And your body and most other animals who aren't nocturnal live on that circadian rhythm. And even nocturnal animals have a circadian rhythm. They sleep in the day and they're up at night. They are all on a rhythm to the sun. And you are an animal like they are too. We all are. Our bodies need that sleep to recover. And without it, elite athlete, so adolescent elite athletes definitely get more injury, period.
I laughed. I didn't want to interrupt you while you were in your mid-flow, but I had a little laugh to myself about your description of the running really fast, sprinting in any given direction, and then changing direction. And it just sounded like my driving. So I was just having a little laugh to myself.
No!
So guys, if anyone's got any specific questions that you want to ask Tony, stick them in the chat, and then we can put them to him as we move through. Okay, let me just start. I've got an interesting question which I thought might be a bit thought-provoking for people. What about niggling little injuries? I mean, it's easy to assess the effects of a large chronic injury, and certainly it's easy to see the effects of a large acute injury. You know, if someone falls off and they've got a broken arm or something, you know, dreadful like that. But what about the niggling little things that people might be suffering with? Do you think that they ought to be ignored? You know, and maybe it's just, you know, the ability for the human psyche to go, actually, do you know what, I don't want to make a fuss, and I don't want to bother anyone, and I don't want to, you know, introduce anyone to my problems, so I'll just ignore it, I'll sweep it under the carpet and it'll go away. But then secondary to that observation is, what about things like transferred pain? So if you've got a niggling little thing somewhere that actually might be creating an imbalance within your body, actually that can then create pain in a different part of your body, which there's nothing wrong with it, but it's because something else is going on over here which is creating that imbalance. So just those niggling little things, ignore them, you know, and do the whole bury your head in the sand ostrich theory, or address them when they turn up.
So maybe I start off by asking all of you, who's got a little niggling injury? I'll put your hand up. So I have. So Ollie has, Joe is, Ellie is, Maddie's, is that a finger, Maddie? Susanna is, Lily's solid. And Ali and Jasper, I don't know.
I think Maddie's just picking her nose.
All right. So my standard rule is, it's a little bit about age, actually. So Ollie with a niggling injury, I'll say,
hang on. Whoa. Don't pick on the old guy.
I'll say, welcome to not being 20 anymore, Ollie. And depending on what the niggling injury is, we might try and look at things to help with that, but we might ignore it a little bit more. For the rest of you, you're too young to have niggling things that remain. If you've got something that's staying with you, you're too young. It should have resolved. It should have gone. And therefore it's not niggling. If you've got an ankle that keeps on irritating you, or a hand or a back that you keep on getting some problems with, or whatever it is, or a neck or something else, honestly, you're all too young. Your body's heals so rapidly. You should not have that niggling problem. And so my golden rule is, if you're under 18, you shouldn't be having a niggling pain that stays. And so we try and work out why, and can we change that rapidly, because we don't want it to turn into a long-term problem. So Bristol Physio I own with Andy Howes, and Andy's a really lovely physio. He's the medical director for female UK basketball, and so professional basketball. And they do lots of pre-screening. And I've worked and done some stuff for Circa Media that some of you might know in Bristol as well. Years ago, we used to do some pre-screening for their before they went on their degree course. And you're trying to work out, has someone got an issue that already we know is going to lead them to have problems? So if you're generally a little weaker than you should be in certain areas, that sometimes can lead you to fatigue more quickly and then have problems. And they're the things, if you're getting a niggle, you're probably a little weaker somewhere, and you need that weakness to be worked on, and you need to be stronger. And bodies cheat, they compensate. So if you're weak in a shoulder, you might raise your neck muscles, or your shoulder girdle, we call it, to help with the shoulder. If you're weak in your your back of your legs, your bum basically, then you might use your back a little bit harder to make up for it. And so sometimes those niggles tend to point to your weak somewhere. And if we get you to just to work on that weakness, the problems go away. So going back into the chronic side, if you leave it too long, sometimes that leads to a chronic problem. Sometimes just by training and getting stronger, actually you resolve that issue because your body just gets stronger naturally. You're all growing, you're all developing. You've all got hormones in you that build more muscle. And we'll talk about maybe nutrition later, and if you eat well with that, then you should be able to give yourself enough fuel to allow yourself to build a muscle slowly and properly. And think about muscle. Muscles are in between. So muscle on the arm has a tendon on one end and a tendon on the other end. The tendons grow a lot slower than the muscle. And so the muscle can rapidly change. The tendons don't get much blood supply. They take a lot longer. And so when you're asking a tendon to get stronger, it might take a bit longer. And therefore we might need to load it a bit more progressively. At your age, it's not usually an issue, but when you're growing still, you're asking a lot more of that muscle over a longer lever. It gets harder and harder and harder. So if you have a growth spurt, suddenly your coordination goes and your power's gone down, and you've got to gain that all over again. And that's also worth thinking about.
It's really common actually that you said that within trampolining. You're absolutely right. When growth spurts happen, and 1 week, you wave goodbye to a 4'3" gymnast, and then they come in the next week and they're 5'6", and you're like, dude, what have you been eating over the weekend? And then all of a sudden they turn into Mr. Wobble and Mr. Tickle on the trampoline, and they fall over and they can't do anything, and they're like.
So if any of you have your performance dips, but it's through a growth spurt, give yourself a break. Don't kind of tell yourself off. Don't kind of get all stressed about it. You're going through a growth spurt. You're not going to have the same control. It's entirely normal. So if you're growing and you keep on growing and your skill level dips a bit, that's okay. That's completely normal. You've got to grow into that new size of you. So don't get frustrated is probably my take home message for that bit.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. That's great, Tony. Thank you. You talked a little bit earlier on about agility, sprinting in a given direction and then changing direction, and some really great advice on discipline sharing. What about thinking specifically about the discipline that they are doing as their primary role within Axis? Have you got any recommendations about things like strength and conditioning and flexibility? How is that going to help with their overall their overall aim of reducing the risk of injury in the first place?
So probably most of you know each other. Some of you're going to be really flexible and mobile, and some of you aren't. And some of you aren't mobile, you're cursing, oh, that's not fair. That other person, look how flexible, look how well they can twist and bend. And some of you who twist and bend really well might feel like you're a little bit more wobbly, and even though you're flexible, you haven't got the same stability. Hypermobility is that flexibility. It's a competitive advantage in the gymnastics world to have flexibility, but you don't have the same stability. Your control tends to be a bit more dampened. And so you have to fight really, really hard for the stability. Those of you who are a little stiffer probably have more stability, but you have to fight lots harder to get the flexibility. Now, here's my key secret about flexibility. It's not about stretching. It never was. If you want to be more flexible, you have to be stronger through the full range. Think of a cheetah. If you've ever seen it on a film or a video, a cheetah running at full speed, think how elongated its legs are. It really stretches every last sinew. So what it's gaining isn't stretch there. It's gaining power through its full range. And if you train a muscle, I'll go back to an arm because it's in front of me. If I just train that arm in a small range without training it through the full range, it's never strong in the stretched out bit. And so if you train and you never train full range and strength through full range, your body feels a little weaker. And if you're weak, you tighten. So all of you right now, think of a really heavy box. Okay, it's in your hands right now. Put your hands out. Where are you going to carry that box? You're going to do it out in front of you, or are you going to bring it into your center? What are you going to do? Come on, show me your hands, everyone. Maddie, let's see them hands. Lily, Harley, Ollie. Big heavy box, Ollie. Where are you going to put it?
Out here.
Really heavy.
I'm absolutely solid, mate.
Yeah, you know it's not. You're going to carry it in closer to you. So what you've done is you've shortened the muscle because it's stronger in a short position. So if you're weak, you're tight. So if you want to get a more flexible muscle, don't just stretch. Get strong through the full range. Does that make sense?
Let me let me pick up on one of the questions that Ali has put in the chat window, and specifically about stretching. She said, "How important is post-session stretching?" If you just said it's not about stretching, but that's a really interesting time frame to place that particular exercise. So, what do you think about that?
It depends what type of stretching. If you do what's called a passive stretch, that is holding a stretch. So if I stretch my finger, that's a passive stretch. You can do that on any muscle, a hamstring, hold it still. If you stretch that at the end of a session, you might feel a little bit of that stretch feeling. That's okay to do. If you do that passive stretch at the beginning of the session, it actually dampens the way the muscle works. So you shouldn't do passive stretching pre-exercise. You should do active stretching. That would be like doing like a lunge and a kick. A lunge and a kick into a stretch would be a good way of warming up that muscle. Just holding the leg and stretching and leaning into it before a session would not be a good way, because you knock out some of the muscle activity. It actually goes to sleep a bit more if you do a hard passive stretch. At the end of a session, it's not a bad thing to stretch, but does it give you any gain? And the answer is probably not. Having a cool down, so reducing the amount of acid in your muscles. So as you do exercise, your muscles produce carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is acidic. So if you stop and then just stop, there's still that acidic carbon dioxide in the muscle. And that's sometimes, if you keep it in there, you can get delayed onset of muscle soreness, which can last a bit longer. So have you ever seen competitive cycling in the Olympics? As soon as they've finished going, they go back in the middle and they jump straight on a bike and they pedal a bike slowly in the middle or at a really reduced level. What they're doing is dumping that lactate out of their muscles, so their muscle remains fresher. So at the end of a session, doing a cool down where you're actually moving is probably more important than doing a stretch at the end. That would be my professional physio view.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, thanks for that. I'll get the question from Ali as well. There's a couple of others, and we'll come to them in a little while. But we'll do the second one from Ali. What's your view on acute and long-term wrist injury prevention that's associated with particularly gymnastics, tumbling, and parkour, where you've got heavy impacts on a flex?
Absolutely fine. So I'm going to put the question to all of you now. So I've already told you what's the best way of reducing injury physically, right? What was it I said to you? What was it you need to do? Get
stronger.
So if you want to reduce your injury to your wrists in gym, tumbling, parkour, what do you need to do to your wrists? They need to get stronger, period. That's it. So your wrists need to be strong. You can do that with multiple ways. You can do it by doing the activities that will strengthen them. You can do it by doing complementary activities. If you want a really good grip strength, which is strength around your wrist, go climb. Climbers are some of the strongest people. If you want a really strong, and interestingly, grip strength is associated with shoulder stability. The stronger the grip, the stronger the shoulder stability. So I'm a shoulder specialist as well as doing lots of things. If I'm trying to get someone in their later rehab to get stronger in their shoulder, I'll give them an upside down kettlebell because they have to grip really tight as they hold above their head and do some stability stuff. That would be a late stage, someone who's trying to get stronger in their shoulder. For their wrist, I would get them doing complementary like climbing. I would give them exercises with weight to go through range, or doing some twist stuff, or doing some bend like a lump hammer, we call it, where it's a heavy hammer at one end, like a weight on one side, and doing slow rotations to fatigue. I would get this really, really tired. And if you can tire that lot out, you can get wrists really strong.
Uh, the last time I went climbing to a climbing wall, and we were racing each other up the wall, and oh my God, all of this, I couldn't drive home. I actually had to have someone else drive me home because I couldn't physically hold onto the steering wheel because my forearms hurt so much where I was clinging onto the wall as hard as I could. And all the climbing people there were laughing their behinds off at me, telling me that, it's actually not about holding on as hard as you can.
By using your legs. But you still need amazing tendon power. But go to the gym equipment in Axis. You guys have got rings. You guys have got the 2 bars to pull on. So you've got lots of stuff that involves pulling your own weight. And apart from the trampoline side, you've got all that other gym. Don't you even have silks there?
Yeah.
Ollie? So you've got things that involve pulling and lifting yourself using your arms as well. You want to get strong on your wrists, do that, and that will complement tumbling and parkour because you'll be strong and stable in your wrists.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thank you. We'll come back to some of those other questions in a second, if that's all right. I wonder if we could turn our attention. You mentioned it just now, actually. If we could talk about nutrition, because I think that's super important. How does nutrition and what you take on board into your body, how does that link in with physical prep? They say that you are what you eat. I mean, it's a bit of a perhaps an overused term or a cliche term, but is it actually a cliche? You know, you are what you eat. I mean, how true do you think that is, and what effect, if any, do you think that the fuel that you take on board has on your body's ability to be resilient to injury?
Again, there's good evidence if your nutrition level is down. One of the papers that looked at the sleep also looked at nutrition, and nutrition ranked slightly higher on their study as a reason for injury. Nutrition, the problem with nutrition is that the information that we've been taught, I'm afraid, is a little biased. And it's being...
Sorry to interrupt you. When you say we, do you mean we as a population?
We as a population, all of us, are given information that's given to us by companies that make a lot of money out of the food they sell us. And so the information we get, unfortunately, is very biased, we call that. So we're being told stuff is really amazing for us by companies who are making, I'm afraid, lots of money, and therefore they're going to tell us that.
Like the sort of thing where they say, you know, such and such a product approved by mums, you know, child friendly, you know, making it sound wonderful when in actual fact it's loaded with sugar, loaded with salt, and they've just put a smiley, colourful packet on the front of it. So
I think maybe I'm quite biased. I'm quite into nutrition. I'm biased. So my bias is that that sugars are incredibly damaging to your system. So you eat food, and now what most of you don't realize is sugar isn't just the obvious, like the chocolate and the cake and things. A lot of foods just turn into sugar in the system. So if I was to tell you a baked potato is 19 sugar cubes, bowl of white rice is 22 sugar cubes, you've not been told that information. That doesn't mean it's bad for you, but it means that it instantly, rapidly turns to sugar. So you might be thinking, I'm eating really healthily by just eating baked potatoes and rice. Well, it's not a bad thing to eat, but it just converts to sugar. That sugar in your system, if you don't need that sugar, it goes to your liver, and the liver says, well, I don't need any more sugar. All the cells I've got are full of energy. So what am I going to do with this sugar? For a lot of us, it'll turn that into fat. And that's why we get fatty liver disease. It's called later on in life. For some of us, we're able to excrete it more, and that's just genetic luck. For some of us, we're a little intolerant of it, and actually we end up putting it on as excess weight. And in the UK, unfortunately, in adolescence, there's about a 33% obesity rate at the moment. That's partly to do with the food that they were told is amazing for them. I don't mind, on the whole, good quality foods, but I do mind the amount of processed food, because the damage it's doing and the simple sugar it turns into then turns your craving the other way around. So if I had my way in the morning, I'd make you all eat an omelette or eggs or something like that has a really good level of fat, a good level of protein, kind of fills you up for a long time. Whereas if you have a couple of pieces of toast in the morning, or even worse, a breakfast bar, you're hungry 2 hours later because that's just turned into sugar. And your body says, thank you very much. Can I have more sugar, please? And so quite quickly, you're hungry again. Whereas if you eat good levels of sensible protein, sensible fat, your body says, I'm quite full, actually. I don't need any more.
What do you you've raised the subject of breakfast, and I think breakfast is probably the one meal of the day that nearly all of us, and certainly I'm looking at the audience of the people that we've got in here, and I know that there are some adults in this chat, but there are also plenty of children who are, for want of a better word, under the jurisdiction of their parents. But I think that everybody that's within this chat tonight, and a lot of the people who will be watching it, they can do their own breakfast for themselves. They have an awful lot of autonomy over that meal, whereas cooking a main family meal at the end of the day, they may not have as much input into that. So what do you think about eating like a bowl of Frosties or a bowl of Cocoa Pops? You know, something that's very easy to do. You sling it in a bowl, you've got some milk, bish bash bosh, and it's readily available.
Again, I've said I'm biased, and this is my bias as well as an educated bias. I've educated myself to this. I've got 2 6-year-old boys. They don't know from us what Frosties are. They don't know what Frosties are. They know what Cocoa Pops are because they got some at breakfast club once in their school, but the school were kind of politely told by a lot of parents, don't be feeding that to our kids. That's just outrageous. So my view is eat porridge, but big flake, or the original porridge, which is really small pinheads. It's called oatmeal. Because it's a complex carbohydrate and breaks down slowly into sugar. Eat eggs. If you're going to have bread, that's fine. But we have rye bread and we have rye or a real sourdough because it's a complex sugar, breaks down in your lower gut and therefore is a slow access sugar. So you get the energy slowly over time. That's what you need. You don't need rapid sugar. You're not running a sprint where you've run out of energy and you need that last little bit. You guys are normal, growing, developing kids. You need food that fuels you for the day, not it's going to be a up and down, a spike and then a drop again, because sugar highs instantly gives you a sugar crash the other end. So especially if you're training and you're serious about your sport, get up and have something sensible like porridge, like eggs on a good bit of bread, something like that for a Western style breakfast. I don't mind. My favorite breakfast, honestly, is fish, like a smoked fish and eggs. That to me is like the best breakfast in the world. And I'll have some spinach on the side that's been wilted down. That is my king of breakfast, but I don't get it very often. I'm too busy, but I will have eggs. I'll boil up 12 eggs at the beginning of the week and I'll have them during the week.
I'm going to pick up on Harley's question. He said, how many eggs would you recommend a day? We're egg farmers, so might be eating too many. Is there such a thing? They've
already said that's a load of rot. The old you can have too many eggs, it's damaging for you. The Edwina Currys, who in my day and Ollie's day told us eggs are bad for us. It's untrue. The cholesterol and the argument about fat in egg is utterly untrue, has been pretty much, from my view, debunked. There are some people who are anti-egg because they say we feed viruses eggs and therefore eggs are bad for us. That's nonsense. Eggs are an incredibly good, from my perspective, form of protein. I think they're great. And to be honest, I have eggs most days. Most days I'll have had a couple of eggs in either as a breakfast or a lunch or some way through. I think they're a fantastic food. So keep on eating them. All of you, eggs are amazing.
Brilliant. My next question, you kind of touched a little bit on it, on what I'm hoping you're going to give me in your response to my next question just now. What fueling do you think is the best ratio when you're thinking about different activities that you've got to perform? So obviously bearing in mind the audience that we're talking to, so we've got competitive athletes that are going to be training at a high level. What about during a preparation or competing at a competition? And then what about just like living a normal life? So you've got different activities with different levels of exercise and different intensity and at different time scales. And you're going to have varied access to when and how you can eat. What should we be thinking about when we're taking on board energy in those different ways and at those different times?
Again, my caveat here is I am not a nutritionist, but I know a bit about nutrition. I am not a qualified nutritionist. The information I'm giving you is based on what I know and what I've read and what I've researched. Adolescents, you need somewhere between 40 and 60 grams of protein a day, probably, depending on your size. Females need a little bit less because men have testosterone and start to get a little bit more muscle mass. But it's not a huge difference. So that would be protein a day for most of you. If you're in normal life, normal adolescent, it's somewhere about 0.8 grams per kilo, it says. Basically,
I was going to say, what does that mean? What does that mean in real?
Let's turn that to real food. So that means a good sized chicken breast. A reasonable sized chicken breast would be enough protein for your day. And I would argue that's probably enough. If you're thinking eggs have protein, cheese has protein, meats have protein, fish has protein, that would cover most of you. If you're having one of those a day in some of your food, the eggs, I think, are 13 grams. You'd need more than one egg. You'd need probably 3 or 4 eggs worth of protein for you. That would cover you, or a chicken breast, or a piece of steak. Someone said they were having a beef stir fry, a portion of meat. That's probably enough for you, protein. It really is. Your Frosties are not protein, and any of that food in the morning that involves a cereal is not really a protein intake. So if you're having a normal, sensible main meal, you're probably getting enough protein. Please eat your vegetables, because what they give you are mineral and vitamins. The really important things. If you're not eating enough iron, then you become anemic, and anemic means you're more tired and fatigued, and your red blood cells you don't get as many, and therefore you don't get as much oxygen in your system. So females need a little bit more iron than males, because you lose more iron in the month than we do, because of natural kind of hormones and what you have going on that we don't. Your periods mean you lose a little bit more iron than we do. There's certain kind of vitamins and minerals that are more important at different stages in your life. But look, if you're eating non-processed food, you're eating a good amount of veg, you're eating some kind of protein, you're probably going to be absolutely fine. Just cut the refined rubbish out of your diet, because it doesn't give you anything apart from a sugar high and then a sugar low. And so if you want a snack, I'd say, if you're not allergic, and most of you aren't going to be, have some nuts, have something that's a really good, healthy snack. That nut is full of fat and full of protein, and it's really good for you. I've not mentioned, but I'm going to. I'm very concerned for an adolescent, about veganism. I don't mind if you're a vegan, but I'm really concerned if you don't understand the implications of being vegan as an adolescent. If you are a true vegan, you're not getting very easily EPA and DHA, which are essential omega-3. They're basically fish oils. That's vital for brain development. And I care more about your brain than I do your muscle, because your muscle can dip and change. And so in Belgium, the medical society there actually has stated they feel that veganism for children is child abuse. That's black and white from their view, because unless you're taking enough EPA and DHA, you're saying that it's okay to not let the brain develop. I'm not that harsh, but it's really, really hard. And anyone who's an understanding vegan and nutritionist will say it is quite hard to get that from a vegan diet. You can get it from algae, and fish get it from algae, but we can't convert as much from algae. So if you are going to be vegan, please understand the things you're missing and make sure you're getting them in a supplement, because it's vital for your health that you're not deficient in these things. And there's lots of other small deficiencies that it gives you. So I'm concerned if you're going down that side. Probably, to me, one of the most healthy diets is eat a lot of fish and eat a lot of eggs. And that will give you a good amount of protein and fat, and the rest, eat vegetables. And if you do or don't eat meat alongside that, I don't mind. But as long as you've got fish and eggs in you, you're going to be fine, as long as you've got loads of good varied veg with it. But eat lots of varied veg, varied fruit. Not all fruits equal. So Bristol Zoo, as my urban myth tells me, they don't feed their monkey population bananas anymore, because they're genetically modified and have about 6 teaspoons of sugar in, which they never used to. So they feed their monkeys sweet potatoes, because they're a complex carbohydrate. And my other really interesting thing for sweet potato, which we love in our family, if you boil it the glycemic load, and think of glycemic load as 100 is 100. Glycemic load and glycemic index are different, but basically the amount of fuel. So the glycemic load of a boiled sweet potato is 10 or 11. That's pretty good. If you bake it, it's 40. That is like 300-400% worse for you just by the way you bake it, because you break down the change and it's suddenly liquid sugar. That's why baked sweet potatoes taste amazing. They're sweet, right? Compared to boiled, they're not so sweet. So food is not just food, it's how you cook it and how you process it. And that's why processed foods tend to be really bad, because the processing breaks it down into tiny little bits. So a 200 calorie chocolate brownie is not the same as a 200 calorie oat bar, for example, if it's homemade. Totally different fuel.
So differentiating, let's stick with the vegetarian and vegan theme. So you specifically use the words veganism in adolescence. So Jasper's put a comment in the chat about several of the senior squad athletes, and some of them being adults, some of them being adolescents, some being adults, choose to be either vegetarian or vegans. So what about vegetarian and veganism in adults?
So I'll go, let me answer his point. So you're veg or vegan, you need as much protein as anyone with meat. I don't care where you get it from, you need that much protein. So whether you get it from your vegetable source, whether you get it from some tofu or some other, some soya, you need as much protein as someone with meat. Probably meat eaters eat too much protein. We don't need as much as we're eating. So you guys probably are more likely to maybe not have as much. So therefore it's important you look at that. I'd really urge you, if you're vegan, to read an article by Georgia Eade, and it's called Your Brain and Macronutrients. You'll get it online, read it fully, and it'll explain some of the things you need as a vegan or vegetarian to have as supplements to make sure that you're getting what your body needs to. As an adult, your brain is mature and therefore doesn't need necessarily as much as a developing brain. And therefore, my worry about Ollie saying he's a vegan is totally different to you guys. Your brain is developing up to the age of probably 25, and therefore your brain needs high levels of DHA and EPA. And Ollie and me don't need maybe so high level because we're not growing and developing in our brain. We're slowly shrinking in our brain.
Sorry, Tony, can you just say that that reference again?
Yeah, I think it's Georgia Eade, and I'll just look it up on my phone. Georgia Eade and Your Brain on Macronutrients. Let me just have a look. Do you know what I'll do? I'll send the link to Ollie and he can send it on to you. And I think if you are vegan or veg and I've got friends whose children are, and I've given it to them, just said, can you just read it? Have a think how that changes what you maybe want to supplement with. If you're vegan, you absolutely need to be on an algae supplement, period, because you are not going to get enough EPA and DHA. You cannot in your diet. And men can only convert a dismal 4%, and female can only convert 9% of, I think it's AHA they call it. It's another one into those in your body. So I'd also say there's trends in life. And if any of you have, I think there was a recent film about being an athlete and a veggie athlete or a vegan athlete. I've forgotten the name of it. It was, do any of you remember it? It was a film on Netflix quite recently.
Because your brain is shrinking, Tony.
Yeah, because my brain's shrinking. There's a recent, really interesting, I had Arnold Schwarzenegger on, who's now become vegan. There is a really interesting documentary. I went through it all. I took notes all the way through, and I debated with a few friends. All of us have our own biases, and the person writing it had their own individual interesting bias. He talked about gladiators being vegan. Some lived by the sea and ate fish. Some lived near a herd of cows and ate cows. Where you lived in those times dictated what you ate. So I think that there's some interesting things to take that. You can be a high level athlete, definitely, as a vegan or a vegetarian. You just have to work harder, and you really need to understand your nutrition, because it's harder for you to get the same amount. But if you do, and you've read up, then you'd already know about EHA and DPA and EHA. If you're vegan and you don't know that, you haven't read up enough about some of the pitfalls, and you really need to read up. But I'll make sure you get that article.
Well, thanks very much for that, Tony. I think that'll be really useful.
Game changer, Jasper. It was game changer. From a lot of us who have looked at it, game changer. I wrote about 3 pages afterwards, going, that's just not true. Wow, how can you compare a cow with a human? Cows have got more than one stomach. It just doesn't make sense. Also, gorilla, very similar to us. Gorillas have a big tummy. Have you ever been to Bristol Zoo? Big tummies. They're able to eat grass and convert cellulose, and they convert it into fat, and they burn the fat as a fuel. None of you can eat grass and convert it into fuel. So we can't eat like a cow. You can't compare us. We're not the same animals. So you have to listen to some of the stuff's great in there. Some of it's a little questionable.
Brilliant. I'll do another question or two from the chat, if that's okay, and then I've got one more question for me, and then I recognise we've just dipped past 8 o'clock, so we'll call it a day after that, if that's okay. So dipping back up a little bit, Lily talked about so during and after lockdown, she had a bit of pain in her lower back. She did carry on running and cycling during lockdown, but was there any specific exercises you might suggest that she could use to maintain strength?
So was it during lockdown she got lower back pain? Was it, or did she have some beforehand? What did it say? Sorry.
It was just after, when I returned to training, really. It was just kind of like little pain in my lower back. So
what I'd normally say is, you're running at a really high level in your gymnastics, the things you're doing. And even though you are running and cycling, your gymnastics gives you something extra. It gives you stability. It gives you power. It gives you loads more. And you dipped, didn't you? And also, Lily, I wonder if you grew a little bit over those 6 months. I don't know. Maybe you did, maybe you didn't. But if you go with, if you didn't, you didn't. That's fine. But you dipped in your exercise level, and then you went straight back to going, hey, I'm Lily. This is what I can do. But Lily wasn't at the same level. She dipped in her stability and control. And that's a really obvious reason to have an increased niggle or back pain. As you trained up, I'd hope that back pain dissipated on its own as you got strong again. And so your body just responded beautifully. You're young, you're fit, you're active, you dipped, you came back up again, you were fine. If you'd have come back probably a little slower and not gone, I'm Lily, I can do this level. If you'd have spent about 3 or 4 or 5 weeks just slowly grading yourself back up to where you were, you probably wouldn't have had that niggle of back pain.
Ella's asked about doing multiple sports, which you mentioned a bit earlier on. Does the multiple sport count as going to the gym and lifting weights? So obviously Ella's trying to be the next Arnold Schwarzenegger, and just looking, hench in the gym. Does that count as an extra sport, or does
no, lifting is lifting's great. If you lift well, is great. Don't forget, lifting is stuff on the back of you just as much as the front of you. So lifting to get stronger around this part of you, that isn't your power in your shoulders to do things. The power in your shoulders is your rotator cuff. So for me, it's all about stability, then power. So if you were going to do a shoulder press with a weight, I'd give you an upside down kettlebell and I'd get you to shoulder press that. The weight you can press will be far less, but the stability you're gaining is far more. So what you're really learning is to be stable, then strong. And that will give you much more power and strength. I'd get you doing kettlebell swings, which is not a higher weight, but explosive force powering up through your legs, your glutes, the back of you, your back, your shoulder muscles at the back of you. Things like that for weight would be far more what I'd like you to do. The strongest core ever measured, as far as I'm aware, is still held by a Russian kettlebell swing guy, far more than any other sport. So kettlebells are my tick, and I get lots of people doing them if their bodies are able to. If you're going to lift weight, definitely counts lifting weight. Lift through full range, not half range, and mix your weightlifting. Don't just do lifting, do gym, do lifting, but do some control of your own body. So I'd like you lifting your own body weight and controlling your own body weight, and doing pull-ups with slow control up, slow control down, stable in your own body.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Thanks, Tony. I'm going to pick one more from chat. Actually, this one's from Ella as well, but a different time. But I think, because I've met, as a coach in trampoline, I've met this so many times, the wonderful world of shin splints. What would you recommend for shin pain that has continued for a long time?
I'd recommend normal. Again, we'd have to see why. There are some things you need to rule out if it's not going away, because some people can get unusual reasons. Some people can get stress fractures, but that's a little bit unusual. Normally on a trampoline, I wouldn't expect shin splints, because your rebound is you're not having the impact that someone else would get running, for example. So it's why you're getting your shin splints. Standardly, I look higher up. Are you strong in your pelvis? If you're not strong higher up, you're asking yourself to stabilize lower down at your foot, ankle, and shin to work lots harder. So think of the Leaning Tower of Pisa. If everything's in line, it's able to stabilize. If you're offline, it's really, really hard. So if you've got a heavy weight holding in your hand, like a lump hammer or a sledgehammer, if you held it like that, you'd be fine. As soon as you tip it to the side, really hard to stabilize. So for your shin, if you're not controlling from the trunk and pelvis, the shin has to do loads more. That can be a reason for shin pain. So it's not the shin's fault itself. You're just overloading it. So my top tip is have a really strong bum. The stronger your bum is, the stronger your back of your legs are, the stronger your legs and glutes are, usually the more stable you are. So for all of you as young athletes, I want you to have a bum, and I want you to have a hamstring, and I want you to have a front thigh muscle. And if they're really nice and big and strong, the rest of your leg tends to be pretty happy, and your back tends to be happy. But being really slim and having no bum means no muscle stabilizing at the back. So good glutes, good hamstrings, good quads. That's what helps stop getting shin splints normally. Big bums.
Lily's making me laugh in the chat. So, Lily, you've completely distracted me. That's put me right off my flow. So the recommendation is definitely to make sure that the squats are on the go, rather than maybe it's just my squad. Whenever I go, right, let's have 10 squats, and they go 1, 2, 10, done, and they skip over them. It's that they're definitely not.
I want you squatting, but as you squat, I want you to do put your weight in your heels and get your bum going backwards, because the squat is more from your hamstring and glutes. If you squat up and down on the spot, it's more quads. And lots of you do quad work anyway, just by bouncing up and down, but you don't do glute hamstring as much as a bias. So I love squats, and but I would get you doing basically dipping from the pelvis, bending from the pelvis, and really using all of your muscles. They're like a 4-man rowing team. Don't take 2 of them out, have all 4 of them working together.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Tony. Okay, right. I've got one final question. So obviously, doing my research about you in preparation for this chat, I learned that you are a hard as nails Grim Reaper, because you are a 5th Dan black belt in jiu-jitsu. So not only can your amazing hands put people back together again, but they can also rip them apart too.
Go on, ask away.
What is a 5th Dan black belt in jiu-jitsu? I mean, what's that all about?
So there's different styles of everything. It tends to mean that I've done it for a very long time. I'm now nearly 50. I started doing it when I was probably about 18. I started doing martial arts, and I've done them throughout my life continually, probably for a lot of time, just like you guys spend lots of time doing your kind of gymnastics and your trampolining. And it's been a big part of my life. I love sport, and whether it be what I do or whether it be what you do, it's so important. It builds friendships. I've got friends for life that I've known for 30 plus years in jiu-jitsu. They're my friends. My kids' godparents are people I've known from 30 years in jiu-jitsu. My best friend, my best man for my wedding was from jiu-jitsu. The friends you make now, this little group of friends are your resilience in life. They teach you how to look after each other. You trying hard, failing, but keeping on trying. So you've got your own individual, someone else might be better or worse than you, but they help you and you help yourself. That teaches you so much. So in life, you guys, because you have this, you have something that you own that's yours, and whatever comes your way, whether it be hardships in life, whether it be things are tough later on or easy, you know what it's like to fight to get better for something. So when you learn to be better, and I've done that through jiu-jitsu to be better, and then if you've done that and you've got to a really high level, I personally feel you have a moral duty to pass it on. So I don't charge, or I don't get paid to teach jiu-jitsu. I do it for love. It's in my spare time. Ollie has to earn some living out of you guys. It's his whole full-time job. I have another full-time job. But even Ollie,
not very much.
Yeah, exactly. Even Ollie, the reason, so I've known Ollie for years, and I've known him for years because your club has never been about trying to make money. It's been about making time and energy and space for you guys to be amazing. And I've always loved that ethic, and why I'm here doing this tonight. I utterly love Axis. I think you are brilliant. I think your ethic is good. I think all of you automatically should, as you get better, help teach it, because you've been given stuff, maybe not for free, but actually really, really cheap. So basically it's been given to you for free, and you probably later on have an onus to give back. That's how society works. You're learning stuff. You later on, karma, what comes around goes around. You'll pay it forwards, and you will have a much better life for it. I am confident. I am usually full of energy. I'm happy. And I've been like that all my life. And honestly, jiu-jitsu has been a huge part of that. So forget the art and the hard as nails bit. It's given me confidence, happiness, friendships, and stability. And wherever I've gone, anywhere, and I've lived all over the world, there's always been somewhere I can go to and join another club, another jiu-jitsu club. There'll always be gymnastics wherever you guys end up. I know a couple of your instructors, and a couple of them, one of them's training to be a physio at the moment that Ollie and me both know in Wales, who is a perfect example of someone who started and passed it along and is full of energy and zest and love for life. And that's what I want you guys to all be. So carry on doing what you're doing, because it's a brilliant way to have a fab life.
Oh, that's... Do you know what? I'm really inspired by what you've just said there. That was really, really inspirational stuff. Thank you, Tony. Your passage through jiu-jitsu and everything, did your knowledge of the human body, I'm not suggesting that everyone needs to have as much knowledge as you do, but did your knowledge of the human body and how it works, and we've talked a lot about tonight about nutrition, so what food groups and stuff you take on board to help support you during your sport, do you think that level of knowledge has helped you be a better athlete?
No, because by the time I learned that, I was already too old and past it. So bear in mind, I started doing this about 16, 17. I didn't learn what I knew now until I was probably mid-30s onwards. And so I was already past my peak, I'm afraid.
Let me rephrase the question. Do you think that had you had some of this knowledge when you were being an athlete, do you think it would have helped you at that point?
Yeah, I've ruptured both my cruciate ligaments. I'm not the best physical specimen by a long shot anymore. And I think if I'd have understood what I understood now, it might have altered my training, my thought process. I'd still have done it anyway. Even though I've got my injuries, what I've got out of it has been more than my injuries have taken away from me. So the trade-off for me has always been worth it. I've got a little bit of problems with both knees. I can still backflip on a snowboard, so it's fine. Life is what you make of it, whether you have an injury or not. You guys and girls, you'll go on and have whatever you make of your life. But if you eat well, if you sleep well, if you train hard, and if you push yourself and really work to be the best you can for yourself, then that will reverberate through every other part of your life. Because careers don't do themselves. You don't just do well in a career. You do it because you've got drive, because you push harder. So all of you who've learned to get up after an injury or after you've hurt yourself on a trampoline and try and succeed and actually learn that next level, you've already learned how to go, actually, I try harder. So you're already a step above. And if I was interviewing in a job now and I had someone come and say, well, actually, I'm this level in gymnastics, I'd already know they know how to work hard. And so it would make me put you a level above someone who doesn't do that professionally. I just would. If you can come to me and you've got this other stuff about you, I want you more.
Perfect. Perfect. I think it's time. I think with those excellent words of wisdom, ladies and gentlemen, it is time to bring this meeting to a close. Do you all want to unmute yourselves, and then we can all collectively go, hey! Thank you.
Yeah, Jasper, I just want to answer one of your questions. Jasper, I have no idea why we drink their milk. It goes back to prehistoric times. It's a bit weird, right? It is a bit nuts. So I'm with you. It is a bit weird, but I don't know why we are. We just all grown up with it. And so you do what you've grown up with. If you grow up every day eating Cocoa Pops, you'll think it's the best thing to do. So I'm with you. It doesn't make sense. You drink someone else's milk. So no idea why we do. Doesn't make sense, really, does it?
For the benefit of the video recording, which is going to come out, we are talking about cow's milk and nothing else.
So, but, hey, really interestingly, Jasper, early on, female breast milk is high in fat. So the fuel it gives you is fat, and you burn fat as a fuel as a baby really nicely. It's only later on we're stupid enough to eat loads of sugars. There's some really good science around it, and it all involves one guy called Ancel Keys. And Ancel Keys was President Roosevelt's dietitian, or doctor, should I say. Roosevelt had 4 heart attacks, so he clearly wasn't doing that good a job. But he introduced high grain diets in the 1970s because he said fat was bad for us. At the time, there was a British scientist called Yudkin who said, no, it's the sugar. And he wrote a book called Pure, White and Deadly in 1972. He went, it's the sugar. Can you not see it's the sugar causing all this disease? And that's only recently been proved to go, no, he was dead right. It was the sugar, not the fat. There's some really interesting stuff if you go and play and look. But milk contains high fat, or breast milk of any animals. And so whole fat milk, high fat. So it's really interesting. Forget the milk, why are we drinking it? What is it? It's a fuel for youngness to grow. And so fat as a fuel is really interesting when you start looking at it, because we're all taught fat's bad for you and gives you heart attacks. Start looking at that, start looking at the science. It's really interesting. We're moving forwards, thankfully.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge is power.
Yeah. Diabetes right now, if you're diabetic type 2 in the UK, a high fat, low carbohydrate diet is being now a medical device for calming down and for some people resolving diabetes type 2. So we've changed medically. We're moving forwards. It's really important that you guys learn nutrition at your age. I would make it a core subject at school. I think it's irresponsible for schools to not teach you about food, personally.
Well, on that damning indictment of our education system, Tony, I'm only joking. I'm only joking. Thank you very much. Everybody, can you all turn your cameras on if you want to? And then we're going to do my traditional thumbs up, and I'm going to screenshot everyone just so I can put this out a little bit later on. So I'll give Ella, what is that?
It's a pea.
Nice.
Perfect. Ah, there he is. Look at that. Welcome, Jasper. Okay, right. We'll go picture in 3 seconds. 3, 2, 1. Big smiles. Perfect. Let's see if that come out. There's at the photo developing station. Oh my goodness, Joe, you look like you've just seen a ghost. We're going to try and do that one again, my friend.
Okay.
Like literally like this.
I'm not allowed in.
Okay, right, ready? Here we go. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Boom.
What I will do at some point, if I'm allowed, I'll come down, and if you have like a strength and conditioning session, I'll just do a couple of bits for you and just talk about some little favorite exercises I have that are probably really good little add-ons, which I can do. On YouTube, I've got probably about a couple of hundred exercises of me showing stuff, but they're quite usually specific for injuries, and I'm giving them to people as a prescription to help. But there's some really good stuff that you can add to a S&C program that really make you work hard. So if you type in Bristol Physio YouTube, I would add there'll be one called, just type in peacock feather on Bristol Physio YouTube, and you'll see me doing like a reverse lunges in different kind of positions behind. I'd add that to anyone working their stability around their pelvis.
When I was researching this video, I was trying to decide whether I should go, because I found all those videos, whether I should screenshot you in various different awkward poses. I did it as a big montage, but I decided against it. But yeah, there is a massive wealth of information on the Bristol Physio YouTube page. So yeah, do go and check that out, guys. But right, it's well past 8 o'clock, so we'll let Tony have his evening back. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It's been a pleasure hosting this. Tony, I'll tell you what, mate, you're an absolute legend. Thank you for coming.
Cheers, guys.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
Cheers. Ta-da.
Bye.
Bye.